Richard Childress, NASCAR legend, entrepreneur, conservationist. These are just a few words that describe this titan of the track. From humble beginnings on the family farm to victory at Daytona and beyond, we learn how one rural junkyard dog became a homegrown captain of industry. Buckle up, we're riding with the original number 3, Richard Childress. This is the Rural Americans. Welcome is a rural town in North Carolina farm country. It's a friendly place, home to the famous Richard Childress Racing headquarters, a sprawling 52-acre campus for one of NASCAR's most successful racing organizations of all time. But our story begins with a young boy growing up on the family farm. While top commodities of North Carolina today include corn, soybeans, cotton, and sweet potatoes, things were different then. And like many other kids his age, Richard Childress grew up in the tobacco fields.
I was born in Winston-Salem, just outside of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Just grew up around here, been here, still right not far from Winston today.
Tell us a little bit about what it was like being a kid and growing up in rural America. And for a lot of kids in rural America still today, there's not a lot of money. These aren't lucrative families typically. What was that like growing up?
It was tough. Growing up as a kid, my stepfather, he was a tobacco farmer too, and we'd have to work in the tobacco fields as a kid. You'd get up right at daylight and you'd be out there suckering tobacco. What they did is popping the tops off, prime the tobacco. I can still feel that old gum up your arm just as a kid. We were tobacco farmers back in the day. So I've been around farming all my life.
The son of a young entrepreneur who made furniture polish that he sold door to door, Richard's father's untimely death forced him to grow up fast and step into a role of responsibility at a very young age.
I lost my dad when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I felt at that point I become a man because I had to take care of myself. I fought my own fights and did everything. My grandfather, he helped my mother raise me for 3 or 4 years, and then she remarried about 4 or 5 years later. And we had a large family. We had 5 of us, and then we had 3 half-brothers that lived at home with us. I ended up having to quit high school in the 9th grade. I finished the 9th, that was pretty good, and to go to work. And went to work, and at the young age of 16, 17 years old, I was working at a service station and a meat market. I was cutting meat and just doing whatever, driving a truck and delivering it. And I learned a lot back then, and it was some tough times for a kid in that area. There were some wealthier families around and being in school, and we didn't have the best looking clothes to go to school in, and it didn't bother me. I always had jobs. I'd get a job working for somebody in tobacco or the fields or getting up hay or whatever I could back when I was a kid to make money. And I remember listening to an Indianapolis race on an old 35 Ford. It had one of them old radios in it. I was listening to the Indianapolis 500 when we were picking tobacco plants to go plant.
Working the land with his stepdad and listening to stock car races on the radio, Richard and his brother were drawn to the legendary Bowman Gray Stadium just a few miles down the road, one of NASCAR's longest-running weekly racetrack venues. Talk about your first interaction with race cars. He must have been a racing fan, huh, your stepfather?
No, he carried myself and my brother to Bowman Gray Stadium one night and let us out, and he said, "You guys go in here and watch a race, I'll pick you up." It was an old phone booth or something there. He said, "I'll pick you up here, I'll be back later." So we went there and we got to watching the race, and we fell in love with racing that night. I must have been 8, 9 years old maybe. So we even would walk to the racetrack and jump the fence, or they would let kids come in with other people, or we'd find somebody to walk in with them, and we'd go to the races every week at Bowman Gray Stadium. And then we seen these kids selling peanuts and popcorn. And I talked to my brother and I said, "We need to get us a job here doing that, and then we can keep coming." So we'd go over there, we'd walk 5 or 6 miles. That's how far the track was from where we lived. Which I'd like to go down there and hang out with the race drivers. These guys, tough, redneck, hardcore racers, were over here under the pine tree, and these guys are really laid back and good, clean racers were over here, and I knew where I wanted to hang out. I'd go hang out with the tough guys, and oh man, I got so many stories about when I was a kid. I can still remember some of those, and you know, hey boy, bring me that moonshine over here, you know, and but that's how I got my first taste of racing, was working over there selling peanuts and popcorn. Billy and Bobby Myers and Curtis Turner, and these were my heroes back in the day. Instead of great baseball players or football players, it was the race drivers. And sometime we'd go up and get in the back of an old race car at the Myers Brothers shop or different places and get to the racetrack and go hang out with the drivers till it was time to go to work selling peanuts and popcorn.
I wonder if you can remember being that age and just the feel of the atmosphere and the sound, and if you could just bring us back to what that felt like.
You know, the biggest thing that I recall was just how tough these guys were that raced. Some of them were out of the mountains, moonshiners, or just tough bunch of guys that were out there racing, and they'd fight about as much as they raced usually, but they would really race and race hard, and it was just a different type. And to hear the cars and smell the rubber and hear the fumes from the gas. And Bowman Gray Stadium was packed, absolutely packed every weekend. That's a crowd. This was back in the 50s probably, 56, 55, 56, in that area. But look how many race cars is around the racetrack. And then this was the cool part, all the drivers would get together and hang out usually on the infield or right here and sit out there and talk and just talk about, I don't know what all they were talking, I never got in those meetings. But it was quite a show, as you can see how many people were there.
Were you a self-taught mechanic? Did you teach yourself how to build engines?
Yeah, just hanging out at another old race shop and just watching and piddling and picking up tools and helping them. And I just taught myself how to work on race cars.
It was on the flat asphalt short track of Bowman Gray where he would discover a lifelong passion and an exciting new way to earn a living. As he grew, he learned everything it took to be a race driver. But all he needed was a car of his own.
They had a $99 claiming division. Well, I didn't have $99 to buy a car. So me and a buddy of mine, Jerry Cooper, bought an old 47 Plymouth taxi cab, and we paid $20 for it. We took that old car and we flipped a coin to see who was going to drive it first. He got to drive it. So he went out and raced it, did pretty good. The next weekend I went out and raced it, and man, I fell in love with driving a race car. So I said, man, we got to figure out how to get us another car. I want to race this week, and it's your time. So we ended up buying another, I think it was a 53 or 4 Plymouth. We were Plymouth guys back in the day. We bought it on a Saturday morning, raced it Saturday night. We tack welded a roll cage in it, taped part of the roll cage in it, and went and bought an old cheap aircraft seat belt and a chain, and here we were. I was a race driver. So that was back in the day, you know, that's how we got started. This was the first modified car that I raced at Bowman Gray Stadium, hand lettered. You know.
Hand lettered?
But, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Old fuel injection. The safety features wasn't the best on this old car. But
you did the modifications?
Oh yeah, I didn't paint that part, but I think I did that. If you look at the seat belt, the old seat belt is out of an aircraft. We'd go to the Army-Navy store and buy an old seat belt, and I think we paid them maybe $3 for them, $2 or $3, but that's what we used back in for seat belts. We had no shoulder harnesses, and just to be able to race and survive some of those days were pretty interesting.
Do you remember what it was like to actually run that first race, your first race ever in that cab?
I remember it was so much fun because you just kind of lay on each other and beat and bang, and everybody would push, and just didn't have a clue of what I was doing. I just knew I wanted to do it.
He had the car and he had the guts. Now he just had to drive and compete against the best to make a name for himself on the racing scene. Over the next few years, he dedicated every moment of his life to chasing the dream. His first big break came in 1969 at the Talladega 500, when the Professional Drivers Association boycotted the race over poor track conditions. This became the chance of a lifetime for a young up-and-comer.
So Talladega, talk about what happened and how some of the stars, like Richard Petty at the time, said, we're not going to do it.
Talladega was my biggest break. We ran the race on Saturday, which was a road course around Talladega. Saturday afternoon after the race, Bill France Sr., Big Bill France Sr., got on a table and said, boys, these guys are boycotting tomorrow. I'll give you $500 or whatever if you'll race here tomorrow in the race, plus what you won. And we got deal money on Saturday to come and run the 250 race, and I won some money. I probably left there that day with, I don't know, $3,000 or something, $2,500, more money I'd ever seen in my life. I said, hell, I'll never have to work again.
And Richard Petty is to thank for that, which is really interesting. How did he and the other stars feel about you guys getting out there and running that race?
You know, they didn't like it, and they came by before the race to try to get us not to run it, but they didn't ask us to join the Professional Drivers Association. I don't guess they thought we were professionals, but this is a car that I raced in that Talladega race that day. Broken axle, spun out on the back stretch, but it was a break. You know, life's about breaks and being able to take advantage of the breaks that you get in life.
When you drove away from Talladega, did you know something had changed?
I knew that it was a big determining factor of NASCAR's survival. The France family had borrowed and hawked and done everything they could to get that race going, and then for that to happen, Big Bill Sr. was not going to let that happen, so he brought us in. We ran the race. The fans were there. They saw a race. They didn't see the stars they come to see, but we put on a show and went on from there. But it was a big break for Richard Childress, and in the future is Richard Childress Racing.
Fortune was smiling on him that day, and he was on his way to achieving the American dream. Little did he know what came next would change racing forever. When we come back, Richard talks about the NASCAR years, his lifelong friendship with Dale Earnhardt, and the legacy his grandsons still carry on. Plus, Richard Childress gets behind the wheel once again to give us an exclusive experience with the legendary driver. That's next on The Rural Americans.
I started driving race cars when I was just 16. From selling peanuts in the stand to being on the scene.
It was the early 70s, and Richard Childress was just a kid making a big splash on the racing scene. He had just driven the Talladega 500, earning the highest paycheck of his career so far, and he was ready to build a shop of his own.
I left there with that kind of money. I came back and built my very first shop and took that money and helped make some down payments to get my own shop. This was the first shop that I owned in the 70s. And in there I am building an engine. You know, I built all my engines to stay up. You know, you'd sleep 4 hours and go back and work some more. I decided then that that's what I wanted to do. I had a good friend who was an attorney. He said, man, you need to incorporate and set up your own business. So we did. We established RCR in 1969.
Fixing street cars by day and building race cars at night, Richard and his small crew continued touring the NASCAR circuit. He picked up a few sponsors along the way as well. And in 1974, he won his first Grand National victory. It was a hard-fought battle, and the competition was fierce.
I never will forget Dale Earnhardt was driving someone else's car that day. We were racing and came down to the last lap, and I lost my brakes, but I needed to win that race. So I went in there and won the race. Dale finished second. He walked up to me and he said, he always had a habit of poking you like that. He'd poke you and he'd say, next time I race against you, I will beat you. So whoever dreamed in 75 that we would have got back together in 81. That's another story don't many people know.
Neither of them knew it at the time, but that night would initiate a lifelong friendship and partnership that would take them as a team all the way to the winner's circle. But first, They had to forge a friendship the old-fashioned way.
Obviously, you were on his radar. You beat him in a race. Do you remember the next time that the two of you came together?
You know, I got to remember the first time I ever heard of Dale Earnhardt. My brother was a track steward at a little track, Caraway, North Carolina. He called me the next morning, a Sunday morning. He said, if you ever look for a race driver, you got to hire this Dale Earnhardt. He came across the line last night, 2 wheels on the wall, and threw on the ground and beat Butch Lindley for the win. And that's the first time I ever heard the name of Dale Earnhardt. And I knew his dad because I raced against him down at Concord. After that, he started running some in the 70s. 79, he was the Rookie of the Year and the champion, and he came and drove for me in 81. So we kind of got to knowing each other in the late 70s, and we both got in this hunting club down in South Carolina, Chester, South Carolina. So that's when we got to really knowing each other and become friends.
Their passion for hunting in the outdoors sustained their friendship through the next several years. And as they were separately finding their own rhythm on the track, together, they were watching a sport that they helped build evolve into something bigger, better, and increasingly difficult to navigate.
When did you decide to transition from driver to hiring a driver and really stepping into that role of ownership full time?
I didn't want to get out of the race car. I didn't want to quit driving. I loved driving a race car, but I could see change coming in our sport. There were new owners coming, bringing a lot of money. The MC Andersons, Osterlin, who Dale drove for, Warner Hodgdons, and so many people came in to the sport that were bringing money, and I could run in the top 10. All of a sudden, I was running 15th and not having as much fun. And I knew if I wanted to stay in the sport, I was going to have to do something different.
After his best season in 1975, Richard knew he would have to progress with the sport he loved to stay on top of the game. He needed the right opportunity and the right driver to get out from behind the wheel and manage full-time. In 1981, the right opportunity came along when Rod Osterland sold his racing team, and with it, Dale Earnhardt.
Well, they hooked me up with Dale that evening. Dale and I had talked about it. And that evening at the Downtowner in Anniston, Alabama, we put the deal together in that hotel room at night. That's when my life and everything around us changed. Next week, I got out of the car and put Dale in it. And it was costing me more money, but I knew it was an opportunity. I had to take that gamble. I went and borrowed all the money on everything I owned, from my building to my home to everything, to race with. And when it was over, I was in debt over $75,000, counting the winnings and everything sponsored. But I knew it was a chance I had to take.
It was a costly gamble, and Richard knew Dale had something special. But even with Earnhardt behind the wheel, they struggled to keep up with the competition. Richard knew RCR wasn't ready, so he released Dale after just 10 races.
We were at Darlington. I remember getting a 6-pack, and we sat out in his old car at the hotel, and we talked about the future. What did we see? He said, what should I do? And I said, I'm telling you, I can't do it right now. I can't give you the kind of equipment and car that it takes to go out and win with. And I said, Bud Moore is your kind of a car owner. You need to drive for Bud Moore. We made the decision in that we were going to party at the end of the year.
With Dale headed to Bud Moore, RCR was hoping for a miracle and finally found it in Ricky Rudd and Piedmont Airlines.
Through some friendships and other things, I hooked up with Ricky Rudd in 1982, and we had some success, won some poles, won some races, and it opened people's eyes that Richard Childress racing could be a viable point. This was a car that Ricky Rudd drove for me and won his first race with.
Wow.
At Riverside.
Look at this. So you must have seen some talent in Ricky Rudd as well.
Oh yeah, I knew he had it. Yeah, he was good.
Piedmont sponsored RCR for the next season, finding fast success with Rudd driving number 3, earning 6 poles and their first NASCAR Cup Series victory in 1983.
It was great for both of our career. It showed that we could win as an owner, and he was a winning race driver, and it set both of our career on a different path. And the whole time I was hunting with Dale in South Carolina, we were friends and doing some fishing, had a lot of conversations in them old hunting camps and sitting around talking about it. And we always talked about getting back together.
That opportunity came the following year when Childress and Earnhardt would team up once again, bringing Earnhardt back into the RCR fold, this time for good. Two Southern boys who forged a friendship through the love of racing, the outdoors, and their rural American upbringing. Dale and Richard knew they had lightning in a bottle. But once again, they struggled on the track and continued to question their future.
We had blown, like midway through the year, we came back from Pocono, we'd already blew 4 or 5 engines. And I said, Dale, you got to go to drive somebody else. You're a lot better than what we're giving you. You need to get out of RCR, get you another ride. Never will forget, he looked over and he said, we started it together, we're going to end it together. That's the kind of man he was. And I like to say the rest of it was history.
And history it was. Over the next 14 years, Team RCR would win several championships with Dale Earnhardt behind the wheel, culminating in one of the most memorable days of their life. Victory at the Super Bowl of stock car racing, the Daytona 500.
And Richard Childress.
That's the winner of the '98 Daytona 500 over here.
Just give me the chills.
But this was probably one of the more memorable wins. If you look there, this little girl had give him a penny, and here's a penny, I just found it, this is good luck. Dale said, bring me some yellow glue, bring me some glue. And he glued that thing right before the race on there, and he won the race. It's just like it was made for a movie. I think Dale Earnhardt winning the Daytona 500 after trying for 20 years was probably one of the biggest wins. Who would have ever dreamed that day that he would have won the Daytona 500?
This victory, after decades of hard work, was a shining moment for the two men whose trials and tribulations were finally realized in the ultimate winner's circle. Team RCR continued to share in a string of victories and defeats until 2001, when the world lost Dale Earnhardt in a 3-car crash on the last lap at Daytona.
You know, I think the toughest time that I've ever been through in racing was when we lost Dale in 2001. This is a hauler that we used that year in 2001 when we lost Dale. This is the hauler that we actually had and brought it back. And these are where all the race fans came in afterwards and signed something, to Dale or about Dale.
The Richard Childress Racing Museum serves as an homage to the memory of Dale as much as to Richard himself and the entire racing team.
This shop is set up other than the handrails, just like it was when we left to go to Daytona in February of 2001. This was a car that we were going to Rockingham to race. These cars were in here set up to go race. This is the last win that Dale had, was this car right here. He won Talladega in 2000, won the Winston Million. And so all of these are different cars throughout the history of the 90s. Let's go look at one of the old 80s model cars. This is probably one of my favorite race cars I own of Dale's. It's still got all the tire marks, beat and bang marks. We won the race at North Wilkesboro, the first race ever won on radials, and people said Dale Earnhardt will never be able to drive these radials because you can't slide them. We won the very first race at Bristol on these radials, and that you can see how it's beat and banged all up around. So I left this car just like it because that was Dale Earnhardt style. You can see the front where he was pushing people around, laying on them and beating and banging. Tire marks, that's probably where he moved somebody out of the way. And it fit Dale perfect, being the Intimidator, a black number 3. You seen that in the mirror, you knew it was time to go or get out of the way.
What'd you think about that nickname for him? Do you think it was fitting?
It definitely was. He would even do his best to intimidate me or anybody. He was not light on anybody when it come to intimidating you. But I would always smile back at him if I knew what he was doing. We knew each other good enough that we could about read each other. For two guys that survive as long as we did and still keep a friendship in business was not heard of in today's times especially.
RCR would continue into the next few years with Kevin Harvick, winning Daytona again in 2007, among many others.
These are just different cars that Kevin Harvick won with over his period, and that's the car that Kevin won Indy with. This was a car he won the Daytona 500 with. Clint Bowyer's car, Mike Skinner's. Dale Jr. drove for me and won the race at Daytona, and that was a changer. for him to come and win the race in the number 3 car, that was huge.
They would take the Daytona victory again in 2018 with Austin Dillon, Richard's oldest grandson, following a dream his grandfather sparked in his early childhood.
If you look there, there's Austin Dillon. Beside of me, there's Ty Dillon over there. And who would ever dream today, from that day there, that he'd be sitting down there with the Daytona 500 win?
Austin has won in both Truck Series and Cup Series over the years, with younger brother Ty carrying on the family tradition and taking home a few championships of his own. In the Childress clan, the need for speed truly runs in their veins.
You think about how far your grandsons both have come in this business, the names that they've made for themselves as drivers. What was that like, seeing your families being together and being able to celebrate your victories together?
I mean, it was great. And, you know, victories are hard to come by, but when you can win them and be with your family at the same time, it's really special.
You look at your grandsons, you know, you look at Austin, you look at Ty Dillon. If you were to get into racing today, and your grandfather was Richard Childress, what would have been different?
Wow, I don't know, you know, those two young men have earned everything they've got. You know, you hear the story about some of these drivers that have golden spoons or silver spoons. They don't. They had an opportunity that was given to them, and I remember telling them both when they very first started racing bandoliers, I said, guys, you got to prove that you can do this. And both of them went out and won in everything they raced in, and they didn't always have the very best equipment. They had good equipment, and their talent carried them out there and become winners in everything they've raced in, and so I'm proud of them for that. But the one thing that's helped me a lot in life as a car owner is I did it all. I built the engines. I mean, I did everything. I even pitted other people's cars if I fell out. And drove the truck, built the chassis, built the cars, did the body work. I've done it all on a race car, so I can understand if a guy has a bad day, or even if a driver has a bad day, you know, how to try to keep them pumped back up. You know, and so I've been on both ends of it.
When we come back, you'll meet Richard Childress, the winemaker, the farmer, the hunter, and wildlife conservationist. Plus, we'll get behind the wheel with this NASCAR legend once again. You're watching The Rural Americans. Today, the RCR team runs like a well-oiled machine, designing, manufacturing, and assembling race cars from the ground up, refining the art of winning, one tiny component at a time.
This is our engine shop. We'll do over 400 engines a year now. At one time, we were doing over 600. It's a major operation in itself right here. This is what they're making out of. That's a steering.
Yeah, it's an
idler arm that we're making. And this is just one of the first stages. See, it's machined all that metal off. So we build everything from the engine components. They're made out of a big square block of steel, and that's what it ends up.
That's amazing.
So we couldn't operate without this, and Rocky is a master at what he does here, and turning out the quality parts and pieces. There's no room for error in a lot of these parts that we make. We do outside work as well, and he's in charge of all of that as well. It's all about your people. This is where we actually, hey Bugs, this is where we do the cars. We hang the bodies on them, and this is a GPS system here that will tell you down to the thousandths to make every car the same. But what he's doing now is trying to get everything he can out of this car within the NASCAR rules. You know, like they're working on everything around the cars. This is one step of getting you to the racetrack. This is our finish fab shop. This is where the cars come in and get some of the final work done to them. There's a car that Austin wrecked the other week down there. He still finished the race with it. This is a car that Tyler had raced. Austin was in the wreck at Kansas with this car. They all wrecked in front of him. He just went right in there with them. So
So what happens? Is this a total
Get
loss
another
now?
car. No, huh? We'll cut the body off and put a new body on it.
A walk through each shop and laboratory of the sprawling complex is quite an experience. The living enterprise born from that very first shop so long ago.
How long to put one of these engines together? Months?
No, it takes about a week to do everything they got to do to it. And then we run it, well, now we're up to running them 2 races, maybe 1,000 miles. But
These are engines for the fastest cars in the world.
oh yeah, all of these are engine set, ready to go at different races. As you can see, there's a lot of them here.
How fast have you ever gone? What's the fastest?
I think the best I was like 209, 210, something like that, racing back before we had restrictor plates. People say, how's it feel to run over 200 miles an hour? You don't realize it till you want to stop. That's when you say, holy, this is fast. That's when you realize you're going fast. This is where we did all of our testing for American ethanol, and we tested everything all the way up to E25. If it had been up to us, we'd be racing E25, but we're racing E15 because that's what you can run in your street cars.
When NASCAR decided to change to a cleaner, safer fuel, Richard was in a unique position to help. As a board member of the American Ethanol Group, Growth Energy, and strong supporter of the American farmer, he wanted to usher in the age of ethanol on the racetrack.
NASCAR wanted to make a change, and for the OEMs to stay in it, there was 3 things they asked for. They wanted the cars to look more like a street car, more technology, so we went to the EFI system, and they wanted a different fuel, a cleaner fuel to race. And that's how ethanol got involved. And American Ethanol has probably, we've been over 16 million miles. We've raced over 16 million miles on ethanol without any challenges. It's cleaner, healthier. It's such an advantage, and it helps us from having to depend on all these foreign countries and spend our money when we can do it right here, and we're helping our farmers, we're helping our environment. Without the ethanol, our farmers would be in major problems. It's just a win-win for everyone, ethanol is.
Once the cars are built, on the asphalt, and ready to race, Richard steps into the command center to oversee every single detail of what happens on the track, from the comfort of his home base.
This is our command center. This is where I watch the race from. It's got the live TV. We can monitor any race car out there on the track. This is live with them racing on these screens, and it gives you all the data. It tells you when to pit, when not to. It tells you what your gas mileage is, what laps, how many laps you can go. And I can talk to the drivers, crew chiefs, spotters. I can talk to engineers or any of them right here, live during the race.
Amazing.
And not only can he design and build these high-precision machines, he can still get behind the wheel and drive.
Now hold on. Carburetor ain't working. Hold on tight.
It's clear that Richard's life has been all about racing. You can find his name on every trophy there is, and his initials on the finest parts ever made. But his name adorns a different kind of label too. The Childress Vineyard's world-class library of wine, grown in North Carolina's first federally designated region for growing grapes.
This is our wine library. Our 2015 Cab Franc, which North Carolina, 2 grapes that really I think grow the best, he can correct me if I'm wrong, is our Cab Franc and a Viognier. And Viognier is so hard to market, but we grow some of the best Viognier here. And the Cab Franc, we won the gold medal with our 15. That's the reason I say
The
15
best of
was
show.
great.
That's just a gold medal. It was a double gold. It was the best of show.
It was the best of show, and we beat 610 wineries on the East Coast, all the way up and down the East Coast. Believe it or not, the people that come through here, only around 50 to 60% come because of the racing side of it. The rest of them come because of the wine. See how he's waxing the top, the old-fashioned style?
What do you call this size bottle again?
This is a Magnum.
A Magnum, that's what I'm looking for.
Pretty
Two
label.
bottles of wine.
Yeah.
So it's a fun label. We do a traditional wax tip with the RC logo on it.
Now, just these right here we have to do by hand.
Only because the bottle is too big for the machine.
Can I pull this off?
Oh, yeah, it's a little bit, it's just dripping a little bit here. So, if you smell it, just
Smell that. I got some great friends at Jack Daniels, which I think makes the best whiskey out there, and I talked to them. They sell us some of their #1 barrels. As soon as they pour them, empty the barrels, they put them on a truck. That same day, we come down here that night and put our red wine in it. And this is called Devil's Tribute, and it's really good. We also have a white that we aged in Jack Daniels barrels, and it's called the Angel's Wrath. Right? So.
Woo! That is good. That hasn't kicked.
Get you in trouble.
15.9%. Yeah, that's trouble. What is it about this soil in North Carolina? This is a big wine growing state, but I think a lot of people don't know that.
They don't realize it. North Carolina was the #1 wine producing state before Prohibition. Today, I think we're 7th or 8th in the U.S., which is a big deal. We came a long ways in the last 15 years.
And I know that you spent some time in Sonoma at the raceway there, and then when you were done, you would enjoy some of the California varieties. Is that kind of what triggered your fascination with growing wine grapes and wanting to do it?
It was going back to going to Sonoma, Watkins Glen, around the Finger Lakes, and a lot of wineries. And I met some friends out there, and I said, man, this was in the 80s. If I ever get the money, I want to have a vineyard someday. So here we are.
What crops are you growing out here?
You know, right now we have soybeans, we have corn, which grows great down here. We got alfalfa. And this over here is our duck impoundment that we like to take kids and first-time hunters and military. We'll flood this with water once the corn gets up, and we'll duck hunt there and take a lot of people. And deer and turkey hunt. I just love taking people that's never enjoyed the great outdoors. You know, we're so blessed in America to have so many wonderful natural resources. And God gave us such a beautiful land, we need to share it with others.
Conservation is another lifelong passion for Richard. The museum's not just dedicated to his lifetime of achievements on the track, but also in hunting, fishing, and preserving the great outdoors.
This is our wildlife conservation area, and we give $1 of every ticket that we sell to support the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Ducks Unlimited, the Wild Turkey Federation, and North Carolina Wildlife Habitat. The hunters and shooters and the anglers are your greatest conservationists that there are today. Without their hunting license being sold, shooting equipment, hunting equipment, guns, all that money, billions of dollars, is raised to give everyone the opportunity to enjoy our beautiful, great outdoors. You go back to the 30s and 40s, there weren't very many animals at all until they really got the Pittman Robertson Act and we really got into conservation. One of the greatest conservationists, two of them in my mind, is Theodore Roosevelt. For what he did, everything from creating the national parks to all the different things that he was involved in hunting. And Johnny Morris, I call him today the modern day Theodore Roosevelt. He's done more for conservation than anyone that I've ever met. I mean, his heart is into it so much. The legacy he will leave behind him someday is gonna just live for many, many years on because of the things he's done for conservation, just like Roosevelt.
As a lifetime friend and longtime sponsor on the track, as well as fellow rural American with a love of the great outdoors, Johnny Morris helped design this wing of the museum. dedicated to their mutual passion for conservation and preservation, and of course, their love of sportsmanship.
So let's see some of your big catches. Do you have them over here?
These are all of mine.
What?
Every one of these I've shot.
No!
Every one of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, everything in here I've shot except my wife's got 1 or 2 animals here.
Wow.
Everything here, I've got the North American 29.
Oh my gosh.
One of all 29 North American animals, the wolf, the grizzly bear. That's 3 or 4 different moose. That's a Grand Slam. Everything you see in here is animals of the North American 29. And to go out and get these trophies, a lot of that money went back to communities or neighborhoods or different areas where it helped people that don't understand hunting.
When we come back, Richard takes us to his farm and reflects on his rural life lived in the spotlight. You're watching The Rural Americans. Richard Childress has made the long journey from starting out working on his family farm to becoming a NASCAR legend. At heart, he's still a true rural American.
So this is a beautiful property. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, I bought this piece back in the 80s, and I've always been in the cattle business, and not always, since the real early 80s, late 70s. I've been in the cattle business, and I love farming. We have another farm over here that we raise corn and soybeans, and I got a duck impoundment, got a shooting preserve. But here we have Black Angus, and I have my group of Longhorns that I just love to see. They're the coolest thing out here is the Longhorns, and I really enjoy being around cattle. I just don't get over here as much as I really want to, but now I come down here a lot more since I'm not going to the racetrack like I used to, so I spend time. I used to know every breed of the cattle, and now we're in the commercial cattle business with raising our Black Angus, and we crossbreed them with, try to get us some black baldies out of it. They bring a little more money. So I watch RFD TV to check on the prices and some of the sales and some of the things. So I'm one of your big fans.
I love that. Why did you go with the Angus breed? Is it because you like the taste of Angus meat? You like the marbling? Why Angus?
I had a black race car. I don't know if you noticed it back in the day. I just love the Black Angus cattle, the beefiness, the flavor of the meat. It's just one of my favorite, one of my favorite breeds out there. I've had Pinskawas. I've had a little bit of everything throughout the ages. I've had Hereford, but I settled in on the Black Angus, and Dean Robertson is my farm manager. He's been with me now for 25 or 6 years, something. So he does a really good job here.
How close do you get to those Longhorns?
I get pretty close sometime. You don't kind of watch them when they got their babies around, but I've got them. I got a friend of mine, Chris Clark, has some of the largest of the Longhorns, and we have Big Red. If anyone has ever heard of Big Red, he's one of the largest bulls in the Angus breed. We have him right up here breeding our Longhorns too. What happened in Denver? Well, I got in the show cattle business back in the 80s, and we won with Whitestone Angus. We won the Bull of the Year out in Denver. In 86, we won it. We also won our first championship. And in 89, we won the female, which was with Goshen. So we've been fortunate to win at both levels at the Angus breed. So this is serious business. Like, you're into genetics. You have one of the top Angus cattle here. You have that cow here. How did you get involved in being the best? Because it seems to me like you're not going to take up anything and not be the best at it. Well, back in the 80s, when we were in the show business, we wanted to be right at the top with the best, and we were back in those days when it came to showing cattle and breeding cattle and having really good top genetics. And then it got pretty political, and I figured my life had enough of politics with racing, so we started doing the commercial side of the Angus breed, and like I say, we breed them now with some Hereford and different stuff to get the black baldies. And I still have my longhorns, which I love my longhorns. That's more for looking at.
Doing what you do and then having an opportunity to kind of step into this role as a farmer, has it changed the respect that you have for the American farmer?
Going back to my young days as a kid, we were tobacco farmers. Back in the day when it took a mule to pull the tobacco split when you were priming it. And I think I've always had a love for the American farmer. Without farming, none of us would be here today. You know, they supply us with our food chain, our meats, our cattle, our pet, hogs, chickens. Without the American farmer, America couldn't exist, and we have to take care of them. And today with American ethanol, buying the corn, keeping our farmers going, that's a big, big chain for our farmers today. So that's the reason I'm involved with Growth Energy and American Ethanol. And today to be in the cattle business, we've got some corn and soybeans and do a little farming. We're not a big farmer, but in heart, I'm a big farmer.
You know what I love about your story as well is you stayed rural. You could have relocated anywhere that you wanted to, but you chose to be here and welcome North Carolina in this small rural community. What does the rural lifestyle mean to you?
To me, it's the American way. I couldn't see being on the concrete in one of these big cities or being in one of these big towns where you have all the hustle and bustle of that day. Rural America is what's keeping this country going. They can talk about everything else they want to talk about. Without rural America, this country can't survive. And for me, just to be a small, teeny part of it, it means a lot. And to be able to help promote the farming industry or the cattle industry or the ethanol industry, it means a lot to me today to be able to do those things.
Supporting rural America and giving back to his community is how Richard focuses his attention these days, building a network of resources to help young people, some who may even be future race car drivers themselves.
Tell me a little bit about the Childress Institute for Pediatric Trauma and how it came to be.
I was speaking in Scottsdale, Arizona to a large group of neurosurgeons, and they were going to pay me. And I said, no, find something I can do for some children. So they came to us, a couple of doctors came to me later and said, pediatric trauma is the #1 killer of children in America. Your child is more than likely to have a serious accident than something happening to them another way. It's the #1 killer of our children. Bicycles, four-wheelers, falls, drownings, so many other things that these children get hurt. Kids are going to be kids. They're going to play and they're going to get hurt. So my wife and I, we got it started with Wake Medical Center, and today it's been turned into a pediatric trauma center with the Childress CIPT supporting it.
As Richard reflects on a life well lived, he looks back to some of the adventures that made him a pioneer of the racetrack.
So you have worn so many various hats in your career, but I think something that will surprise everybody is that you were actually a stunt car driver in some big name motion pictures.
Yeah, back in the day when I was driving a race car, I would have to do whatever I could to make extra money to supplement it. And right here is one of the last ones I did. I did that was the Super Mario Brothers. I crashed that car, and then I did some work with Burt Reynolds on several of his shows, and Smokey and the Bandits too. We did that one, and but it was so much fun going and doing that. And then I got busier and busier, and I had to go do something else. But it was a fun time. But that was the last one I did. I think I still hurt from it.
#3 is Richard Childress Racing, but I don't think a lot of people know that you drove the original #3.
The reason I wanted the #3 is, as you see here, I had 96, and the guy that was hand painting it, I said, I want a single number, it'd be half the price, won't it? He said, you get a single number, it'll be half the price. So that's how I ended up with the 3. And I got behind the wheel with you in the car. Now that was a blast, like my old buddy Johnny Morris. When we took him riding at Talladega, that's one of the most memorable, fun days I've had, was to see the race fans and how they like to see that number 3 on the racetrack, and to see Johnny, because he was a huge Dale fan, and see the excitement that he and I had together.
The story of RCR and the number 3 car is far from over as he presses fearlessly into the future, as his racing legacy and memories with Dale still hold a place of honor in his museum, his life, and his heart.
We were hunting in New Mexico, and we called it the Great Horse Wreck. We were going up this mountain. His horse hit this ice and started flipping over. And we flipped over, and I went off the mountain, and his horse went off the mountain. And I'm laying down there, and I'm busted up. Dale came down there, and he was as white as sheet. You okay? Yeah, I'm gonna be all right, Dale. He said, you pulled my horse off the mountain. You had to know Dale to hear him say that. And I said, Dale, you know, if I hadn't have made it off this mountain today, you'd have had to go to Phoenix and race this race. And he said, if it ever happens to me, you got to go to race. That's how we ended up staying in it, was from that horse wreck. If we hadn't had that conversation, I don't know that I would be here today.
You know you're going to see him again one day. It's not over for Richard Childress and Dale Earnhardt.
Oh no, one of these days we'll join hands again and talk about the old races.
When you look back where you began, and you look at where you began from this juncture, where you are now, did you ever think that it would be this big?
No, not my furthest dream. I always dreamed of winning a championship and winning cup races when I was driving. But I was very fortunate in life to have a grandfather that taught me a lot of the things about life, and surround myself with a lot of the right people. Life's about that road. You know, you can take whichever way you want to go in life. And I was fortunate and took the right road instead of the road of a tough life. Only in America could a kid with a $20 race car and a dream be here on RFD TV today with you, Christine. Only in America.
Only in America. A perfect way to define the Richard Childress story.